Hey everybody, I'm Susan Spires. I'm on the national board of NCJW, and I'm really excited to welcome you to our first NCJW webinar. The National Council of Jewish Women is launching weekly this webinar series to give all of you across the country tools to stay connected to us, to reframe our work, and advance the Jewish values that drive our work. In Judaism, pikuach nefesh, saving lives, takes precedence over almost everything else we might do. So what does that mean for us right now? It means that coming together online instead of in person will help all of us play a part in limiting the spread of COVID-19. And I don't know about all of you, but I know for sure in my personal life and my business life, I am like living on Zoom right now, or Hangouts or WebEx. And we are all figuring out how to do virtual lunches and Hangouts in our work. So this particular webinar is so important, as we will, it is the kickoff, and we will continue every Monday at 1:30. We are going to really show you how to do this online today. The series, just so you know, is going to be recorded, posted online, and shared widely for those of you who did not or were not able to attend in person. And the series itself is going to include advocacy, service, technical assistance, and paths to staying connected during this trying time. So again, so glad you were able to join us. A few housekeeping notes before we get started. You'll notice that you are muted and cameras are turned off. Our intent is that you stay focused on our speakers today and the content. Please feel free to write questions down or drop them in the chat box, and we'll have time to review them at the end. I will be checking chat as we go through this, and you can see it under the mute, stop video, and more. Reach out to Ari at asolomon@ncjw.org or write in the chat if you're experiencing technical issues. We might have limited capacity to address these issues while the webinar is going, but we'll do our best. And a gentle reminder, again, that this is being recorded and it will be uploaded to our website. So with that, it is my pleasure to introduce Emily Goodstein, founder and CEO of Greater Good Strategies. Emily brings over 15 years of nonprofit advocacy, fundraising, marketing, and organizing experience to her work and to all of us in this conversation. Emily's work helps organizations like NCJW fulfill their missions, leveraging a multi-channel approach to meld offline and online tools, which is exactly what we're talking about today. And it includes social media strategy, web and email outreach, fundraiser, user experience consulting, and content marketing. She has a lot that she's going to be able to share with us today. We also want to welcome Liz Elmira Goldberg. She's a senior strategist at Greater Good Strategies and is a consultant with over 15 years of experience in marketing and communications, strategy planning, and implementation. Her specialties, which I think are so relevant today, are audience-focused messaging, content marketing, brand engagement, media strategy, and revenue development. Liz works with organizations to use marketing and communication tools to grow their audience, revenue, and impact. So we are so very excited to welcome Emily and Liz to lead us in how to run a successful online meeting, which is going to be so very important as we move forward over the next few months. With that, I'll hand this off to Liz and Emily.
Thank you so much. I'm Emily Goodstein, and Liz, I want you to just say hello so everyone can see your face for a second.
Hi all, thanks for having us.
It's such a special treat to be here. I am a big fan personally and professionally and politically and spiritually of NCJW. This is definitely a highlight of the day, and I'm pretty sure will be a highlight of my hibernation phase. I'm glad to see folks are here and healthy and still keeping the important work of NCJW front and center. So Liz and I are gonna sort of tag team our presentation. We have a handful of slides prepared about some real kind of foundational online meeting best practices, and then we'll leave a ton of time for questions. Does that sound right to everyone? Excellent. And again, a big thank you to NCJW for inviting us to be here. This is really a nice change from the rest of the week. All right, I'm gonna share my screen. All right, so here's the agenda that we've prepared. We're gonna talk specifically about Zoom on this call. And I wanna just be clear that Zoom is not the only online meeting platform, and there's a lot that goes into online meetings in addition to the technology. So we're gonna be also talking about the general sort of best practices and cultural norms around digital meetings. But a lot of our specific technology recs are gonna be about Zoom. Liz, am I missing anything about kind of setting this all up? What else?
No, I think that's right.
So we've divided the conversation up into what to do before the meeting, what to do during the meeting, and then we have a few additional resources that we can share at the end of the presentation. So just to kind of dive in, the question of why Zoom has come up. So if you want to run an effective meeting, the first step is probably to think of the online tool that you'll use to determine where to invite people and how to run the meeting from a tech perspective. And personally, at Greater Good Strategy, we really like Zoom. We are not Zoom saleswomen. We do not own any piece of the company. Really, I like Zoom for two main reasons. I think the company has invested a little bit more in the actual, the connectivity of their tool. So compared to other similar products, I find that I get better video connection on Zoom than other tools. So that's the first reason. And then the second reason, which is I think a little bit more important, is that it's just much easier to use. I think setting up an account is easier, there's fewer steps, and when you're on Zoom, there's kind of less distraction. It really just does kind of one thing, which is video meetings. It's not trying to be a lot of different things to different customers. So that's why at Greater Good, that's why we use Zoom, but I wanna just be clear that as you, within NCJW, think about running your own online meetings, you may choose a different platform and that's fine. Those are the reasons that we've chosen Zoom. Liz, what else? I know you're a Zoom fan as well, super fan.
Yeah, I think, I like that Zoom offers both the opportunity for video and phone, and we're going to get into the specifics of that in a second. But I think for the purposes of us all working from home, it is nice to use the video feature as much as possible, just so you can see each other and really feel sort of engaged and present in the meeting. But we will talk about both options, which is a nice feature of Zoom as well.
I want to lift that up, Liz. Through this meeting, you'll hear us talk about kind of like online meeting norms or like how to set the cultural expectation for an effective meeting. And as organizers, which we all are doing work in our different communities, the personal connection that you get when you're with someone in real life is sometimes lost when you have to communicate virtually. And in my opinion, the next best thing is to keep video turned on and make the conversation feel as if it's happening in person. So I loved how even in the email that NCJW sent out, it said, grab your favorite beverage or snack and, pull up a chair for this conversation. Because we have to remember that although folks are kind of two-dimensional sitting at their computer, at the end of the day, they're still real human beings. They're also navigating a global health crisis. They're at home and they're still interested in human connection. And in my opinion, the best way to do that is to be sort of video forward. So whenever I come to a virtual meeting, I'm always ready to have my video turned on. And I sometimes even recommend in advance that people know, hey, we're gonna really all try to keep our videos on for this meeting to make it feel as close to real life as possible. All right, I'm gonna move to the next slide. So this is sort of how we've organized our thoughts for a successful meeting before the meeting starts. So these are some kind of obvious things and some less obvious things. The first thing that will happen before you run an online meeting is to send out an invitation. So using what NCJW did as a model, they sent out information about the time, just like you would an in-person meeting. They sent out the link, where to go. Whenever we do a video meeting, we also send something that says, if this is the first time you've used Zoom, you may consider logging in early or testing it a day in advance, because there's a small amount of setup if folks don't have a Zoom account. I am a former headshot photographer, so this is an area that I feel very strongly about. I really like to have the most plain backdrop that I possibly can. If I had my way, I would actually have a beautifully curated bookshelf of like rainbow progressive books by women behind me. I don't have that right now in this office setup, but that's probably the best thing to do is think about what's behind you. I really recommend not having a full window behind you. And I'll try to actually move my laptop so you can see. It looks, you kind of get like a weird glowy effect if you're in front of a window. And also your face gets almost like full shadow. So it's really hard for people to see you when you're seated in front of a window. So that's the story on backdrop. Liz, what else on backdrop or the invite?
Yeah, I would just say, going back to the phone or video option in the invite, that's the perfect place to clarify. A Zoom invitation includes both like a link to log in with video. It also includes a phone number to dial in. So if you include all of the information that Zoom is giving you for the meeting, your recipients are going to see both. And so you might just want to immediately clarify whether that will be a video call or it will be a phone call. I think that's helpful. And as Emily said, we are always video first, but if that's not an option for folks on your call, no matter what the reason, it might just be helpful to say, we're gonna all dial into this call, or we're gonna all log in on the video option on this call.
I love it, Liz. I saw some great content on Twitter the other day where people said there's a million ways to host an online meeting. You just have to put your intentions out there and be clear about the culture you're creating. Just like we would for an in-person meeting, right? If we say we're having an in-person meeting, come hungry, we're serving lunch, or, it might be chilly, bring an extra layer because the convention center has high air conditioning or something. It's the same thing. The expectation is we're going to have video on, or we're all calling in, etc. I also just wanted to flag, there was a question that came in over the chat about how you get the initial link to invite people to your call. And I'm going to cover that when we talk about setting up your account. So hang tight for another second. I'll get to it in 1 minute. I did also just want to flag the question of sound. Sometimes it's helpful in advance to check your sound. Often I'll say to Liz, hey, can you log on a few minutes early? I just want to make sure that my sound is working properly, and almost do like a mini mic check. I also keep a set of headphones at my desk that I can plug in to my laptop to potentially minimize any additional sound wherever you are, because you want to make sure that the folks that are in your meeting don't have any trouble hearing you. And you also want to present sort of that polish, just like you would in person. If there was a loud meeting happening next door to the gathering that you were hosting, you'd close the door, or you do something to sort of mitigate the background noise. The same is true for an online meeting. And then going back to my previous life as a headshot photographer, I really like to raise the laptop or the computer camera up a little bit, so it's either at eye level or above. It's sometimes tricky when you're on Zoom to have the camera kind of low down, and then you end up kind of looking crunched, or you're looking down. I was recently on a call with someone who had some sort of setup, and they were looking here, like they were talking to me here, but looking here. And it really made me feel like they weren't talking to me. So as we, again, try to mimic that really kind of powerful in-person connection, the best thing you can do is set your camera up so that it's at a nice angle. My massage therapist would say it's important for it to be ergonomically correct. And that means not that you're not consistently looking down, straining your neck, but I think it also creates a really nice visual. When folks are looking directly into the camera at you, you want to be able to look right back at them.
I would also say we have a screenshot later in this presentation too. There are some Zoom preference settings that you can walk through to sort of test what your sound and video is going to look like before a meeting. So we can show you that as well coming up in a sec.
Thanks, Liz. Good. I like that foreshadowing. So this is a slide that there's often a lot of questions that come from this slide. I wanted to just let folks know about how to actually set up your Zoom account. So if you go to the Zoom website, you can get there by Googling Zoom, or I believe the URL is zoom.us. You'll see that you get several different account options. The basic account is a really good option for somebody who hasn't really done a lot of online meetings, who's probably going to be meeting almost exclusively one-on-one with folks I actually got my dad set up on Zoom yesterday. We chose this account for him because he's meeting with the rest of my siblings one-on-one, and this was the right approach for him. The big kicker with the free Zoom account is that you're limited to 40 minutes for meetings of more than 2 people. So for example, if I were hosting this meeting, we would get a little notification after 40 minutes, actually after 30 minutes, saying, in 10 minutes, your meeting will end unless you upgrade. So for some people, this is fine if you want to keep your meetings short. But for others, I would recommend, oh, great. So Anne is saying, I've heard this from other people. Anne just chatted in that she's been using the free version with family meetings, and it looks like Zoom has been extending the time at no cost. I've heard that as well. I'm not sure how long that's going to last. And I think you may consider, if this is an option, you may consider going to the $15 a month option. We'll talk about it in a second, if that's a budget reality for you. Again, there's a sort of moment of stress that comes along with getting that pop-up notification and thinking, oh, is the meeting going to end? Do I need to wrap up, etc. And I think sometimes it's helpful to think through the feeling that your participants will get if that little message is there. Just to talk for a second about the pro option, that's what I have. Oh,
Can
Liz,
I just interrupt you for 1 sec, because I just want to flag that Sheila Katz, CEO of NCJW, just noted in the chat that if you need a longer meeting than 40 minutes, NCJW National would be happy to create that meeting for you. So just want to flag that because Sheila has made that generous offer.
Thanks, Sheila. That's an amazing service, I feel like, that the national office would provide to sections. I do want to also flag that this is where the question had come in before, where do you get the invite link? It comes from your account. So once you've gotten your account set up, you'll see a little prompt that says how to invite people to your meeting. And that's where you get that initial code. Your Zoom room that you're going to use has almost like an address or a code that you'll use. And so that sounds like the type of thing, if sections need it, that NCJW could set up for folks individually. All right, so I'm going to move to the next slide. So we're now past the what to do to prep moment, and I want to talk about what to do during the meeting. So I think there's probably 8 or 9 features that I want to run through in detail, and the way we've talked about them is by giving a screenshot of this little control panel that folks can see when you're actually logged onto a Zoom meeting, and explain how these different components contribute to a successful meeting. So the first one, and this is kind of a big one, is the mute function. I'm a big fan of keeping myself on mute until I need to speak, which is sort of a cultural best practice in case there is background noise. Sometimes the Zoom microphone picks up on someone else talking or a phone ringing. So the best thing you can do is sort of be your own mute advocate and generally be default muted until you're going to jump in and say something. If you're hosting a very large meeting, you actually have the ability, or a small meeting, if you are the host of the meeting, you have the ability to mute all participants when they log in. And when you're the host, you also have the ability to mute participants during the meeting, which I just want to say, as an organization with amazing values that identify directly with mine, there's something that feels like a weird power thing about muting someone else. And I try to do it very sparingly, but if I do it, I usually send a message to that person and say, hey, I muted you for this reason. Feel free to unmute when you want to jump in. I never want to be seen as silencing someone potentially in a meeting and sort of squashing their voice. Liz, am I making sense about that? I feel very strongly about that.
Yes, as I unmute myself to talk. Yes, I think that's right. The one thing I just wanted to clarify for folks is the screenshot that Emily is sharing right now. If you are in the video and you go down to the bottom, this bar appears at the bottom of your video screen. So I just wanted to make that clear for everyone as to where to find all of these options.
Things might look a little different because we're in the screen share, so it depends on what your setup is, but I might actually stop sharing for a minute and then people can see the bar at the bottom. So now it should definitely be default at the bottom of the screen. All right. So speaking of screen sharing, you should also see in that same nav bar a green square with an arrow. And that's the tool that we use to share screens. The times that are helpful for screen sharing are when you have a presentation, like this is a set of slides we've created in advance that you want to share with everyone who's participating. And it's nice because Zoom allows both the video function as well as the screen function. You may also imagine that there will be times as a section you might be coming together to wordsmith content or perhaps put a joint statement together, or maybe get feedback on a visual for a release or something that you're bringing to life on the web. And it's really nice to be able to say, hey, here's the document. Let's all kind of come together and talk through that. I would say some organizations like to use the screen share as the agenda function to share an agenda, like in a Google Drive document or something. I actually prefer to start a meeting by putting the agenda in the chat. So it seems like folks are using the chat a lot, which is wonderful to see. One way that I really like to welcome everyone to a conversation, if I'm hosting a gathering and we've prepped an agenda in advance, is once everyone has come into the Zoom meeting, copy and paste the agenda, put it in the chat for everyone to see, and say, hey, you know, here's the working agenda. Is there any feedback or any additions to this agenda we've put together? One kind of flag there, you can't put anything in the chat. Anything you put in the chat can only be seen by the people who are logged on at that moment. So if you have a meeting that's supposed to begin at 1:30 and you pop in early and you put the chat up, you put your agenda on chat at 1:28, most people won't see it because they're not online yet. Liz, what am I missing there with the chat feature?
No, I think that's right. You got it.
One place, this is just a cautionary tale. You can send private chats within the Zoom chat function, but sometimes it gets a little tricky. It's hard to quickly navigate what is a private chat and a public chat. So just double check that. I would hate for a message that's only intended for one person to go to everyone or vice versa. All right, so now we're gonna go through 4 other functions. Stop video. So again, you can see in that navigation bar that Zoom has provided that there's a camera icon, and this is how you can toggle between stopping and starting your video. It's especially helpful if you, for example, have a pet coming into the screen and you want to minimize that for a second so folks can't see it, or if you have to maybe get up, move your laptop to another location. Sometimes I keep my video turned off at the very, very, very beginning of a meeting. If we're kind of getting started until the meeting actually begins, then I turn the video on. There's a lot of different kind of creative times to use the video on and off. But Liz, am I missing anything about video on and off?
Yeah, the only thing I would say is sometimes if you have a slower Wi-Fi connection and you're like hearing a little bit of like lag or somebody's freezing up or you're freezing up, if you stop your video rather than just quitting the meeting, that takes the bandwidth down a little bit and you're sometimes able to continue the meeting just not on video. And then when your Wi-Fi strengthens, you can turn the video back on. So that's a little trick if your Wi-Fi seems a little buggy. That's
a great point. We do that all the time. Especially now, everyone is using video conferencing, right? So I know even in my apartment building, I can tell, I see the Wi-Fi and video connection slow down a little bit when the workday begins. So we've gotten a handful of great questions in the chat that I just want to address quickly. So Lynn is asking, people often put links in the chat, but how are you supposed to use them or save them for later? That's a great question. So there are ways to save the chat. So Diana explained, Diana, I love your Zoom skills. Diana explained that you can save the chat for later. My personal preference, if somebody puts a link in the chat and it's appropriate for the culture of that meeting, you may just click on it at that moment, keep the tab open on your computer and come back to the video conversation. And then it's sort of in your browser, or it's possible if someone puts a link in the chat, they want you to see it in that moment. And maybe everyone in the meeting is collectively navigating to this other page. Those are questions I think you can set as the meeting facilitator. And then Sue is asking how to have a still like a headshot or a logo or something when you turn video off. And that is part of the Zoom settings. So when you set up your account, there's an option for putting a headshot or some sort of image associated with your account. And I know a lot of organizations will put the organizational logo there. That's also the place where you can set the name that appears. You can see my name is Emily Goodstein and I've put my pronouns in there. I know I was in this Zoom conversation with my dad yesterday and he put a whole bunch of information.
It's 2 o'clock.
Excuse me, that's just my computer talking about what time it is. I want to also just recommend the best thing you can do is just really put your name in there. You don't need a ton of other information. It's really best to just have your name. And if you choose to put your pronouns in there, that's also sometimes recommended if you want to do that. But I don't think it's helpful to have a ton more information because it'll get cut off and folks won't be able to see it all. Okay, so
there's a question about private messages and being recorded and can people see them? And so I just want to say a couple of things about that. During the course of the meeting, any private messages that are sent cannot be seen by anyone else except the person you're private messaging, including the host. However, if the Zoom is being recorded, those private messages are also recorded and they are available to the host or the person with the recording. And then the other thing is that anybody on the call, if the call is being recorded, who saves the notes or saves the chat will also see those private messages. So best rule of thumb is to not send anything in a private message that you wouldn't feel comfortable with everybody seeing. And Claire asked, oh, hi, Claire, we've written emails by you. It's so nice to see you. Claire, you asked if this webinar is being recorded, and yes, it is.
And I think that there was another question about actually setting up the account and where you get the link, which we can go over in more detail when we're done with the deck if there's other questions about that. So the one other feature I want to talk about here, Liz already mentioned the record functionality, but you'll see in that navigation bar there's a camera icon, and that's what you use to record a meeting. I would recommend when you do the meeting recording, if you choose to do that, and you could hear how expertly it was set up in this conversation, right? For folks who weren't able to attend live, we recorded this meeting. You'll have a choice to record to your computer or to record to the cloud. And I usually recommend the cloud option. And what happens is you choose record to the cloud. And when your meeting is over, sometimes it takes a few minutes, sometimes it takes an hour. You'll get an email saying, here is a link to your cloud recording, and you can then share that link with whoever needs to see it. Okay, so one other Zoom best practice that I like, and then I have a really juicy recommendation after this slide, so you should definitely pay attention. It's one of my favorite Zoom features right after this. Sometimes folks don't want the speaker view to be the only person who they can see. So I turned off the share for a second just so you can get a feel. You may notice in the upper right-hand corner, you see a button that either says speaker view or gallery view. So speaker view means that the person who's speaking, their video takes up the majority of the screen, and gallery view looks like the Brady Bunch. My preference, again, going back to running an effective virtual meeting, is the gallery view, because I think you get a lot of information from people's faces. Are people bored? Are they angry? Are they distracted? Are they happy? Are they laughing at your jokes, etc.? Sometimes, depending on the size of the group, you'll even see someone, if you can get everyone's video on your screen at one time, you'll see someone raise their hand. if we were in person, you'd read a lot of those sort of body language cues, and you can do some of that by having the gallery view and being able to see as many faces at one time as possible. So you can see this is what the button looks like, gallery view versus speaker view. Okay, the next thing I'm going to talk about is my #1 favorite Zoom tip. Are you ready? So when you were setting up your Zoom account, which I'll share my screen and talk through how to do that in a second. It sounded like there were some questions. There is a video settings feature, and one of the settings is touch up my appearance. And I just want to own, I know that there's a degree of vanity. There's a lot going on in the world right now. Maybe this is not a priority, but for those moments when you want to look presentable, and maybe you've been on your 15th Zoom call that day, and you just want to look a little fresher, a little brighter, I would choose touch up my appearance. It's almost like applying a filter to your video. Okay, last slide, and then we'll have 25 minutes for questions.
Sorry, can you just go back to that slide? Because I just want to flag that this is the place, if you go to Zoom and then you go, I think it's probably different on a Mac or a PC, but there's an option that says preferences, or it might be called settings or something like that. So Emily is showing you the video view, and this is where, if you log on to this before a meeting even starts, in this section right here, it will show you what is going to be seen. So it will show you what the video looks like before the meeting starts. So you can see, is there too much light behind you? Is there too much light to the side? You know, should I put some earrings on? Whatever you want will be right there in the video. And then also, I just want to flag underneath video is audio. So that's where you can test your mic, if you can hear, if you have headphones. So you can walk through all of that before a meeting starts in this preferences or settings screen.
And one thing we'll do if there's interest is I can just, when we're done with the deck, I can go through and show you exactly where to find this. Mm-hmm. As Liz mentioned, it'll be different if you use a PC versus a Mac, but we can run through that. I wanted to also provide our contact information. So Greater Good Strategy works with nonprofits, including NCJW, one of our favorite clients. Here's how you can find us. One flag, I just want to note in our email address, it's just one strategy. Sometimes people try to email us at strategies and then it doesn't get to us. So I always like to mention that. We're doing another webinar on Friday. I know NCJW has an amazing webinar calendar, so you may be webinared out, but we're doing a webinar on Friday about how to run a virtual team. So if you're going to be, managing a group of people from afar and that feels helpful, you may consider joining us for that webinar on Friday. We also are hosting office hours. So if you have other questions, you can join us on Facebook Live. Just head to our Facebook page. We'll be there tomorrow afternoon answering questions about digital marketing and online fundraising. And you're always welcome to reach out using the email addresses that we just shared. There was a question in the chat. I have a really controversial answer about it. I'm just going to jump in. So one question that came in through the chat is about backgrounds. So using virtual backgrounds. Zoom has a function, it's almost like a green screen function, like you see on the news, where you can make yourself look like you're sitting in front of, you know, the San Francisco Bay Bridge. Or
I'll change mine so you can see what it looks like. Oh.
Okay, exactly. So here's a picture of Liz is using a virtual background. So this is my own personal opinion. This is not a mandate at all. I think that sometimes they're done really well and you can't really notice them and they just kind of have an added level of polish. And sometimes they turn out to be really distracting. And again, if we're going back to an effective meeting, you really want folks to be focused on the content that the group is sharing. You as the host are focused on sort of the synergy of the group. And sometimes the virtual background ends up just kind of taking away from that. I know we've all been doing Zoom Hangouts with friends and family, and that feels like a great place for the virtual background. You know, I imagine that soon the technology will evolve to look even more crisp and we can have, you know, branded backgrounds with our logos or something like that. But for right now, I'm still recommending that folks choose a neutral background in their homes. And if you feel really strongly about the virtual background, I think you're going to look great using it. But there's other kind of more foundational things, I think, about the virtual background, other more foundational things other than the virtual background. So making sure your sound is good and the camera angle is right and your Wi-Fi connection is strong, that I would probably put a little bit higher up on the list. Again, that's only my opinion, and I love everyone that's on this call. So if you're using it or want to use it, I still endorse your work. Okay.
Somebody asked, a couple folks asked about the time for the webinar on Friday. So I'm going to put a link in the chat right here, which is a link to the Greater Good website, which lists both the Facebook Live office hours that Emily just referenced and the schedule for the Friday webinars, but it's Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern.
I want to, I don't know who wrote this, who from NCJW Comms wrote this, but I want to just, underscore this, that sometimes if there is a glare or something else with the virtual background, it looks kind of like you're floating, and then it's even harder to really kind of feel grounded. I'm just going to look through the chat for a second right now to see. Okay, so Liz answered the questions about Friday. Oh, thanks, Amanda. I totally agree with you about that. And I wanted to also mention, Liz and I are doing another webinar, also also for NCJW on April 20th. So I think it's the same time, 1:30 Eastern, April 20th. And it's a little bit more of like an advanced conversation about really effective relationship building virtually. So now that you've come to this webinar, and we have 20 more glorious minutes together, but that might be a sort of a next step webinar that you might want to come to about really building relationships virtually, continuing our grassroots organizing work, even when we're not able to do it in person. Sheila, did I get that description right? Is there anything I'm missing there? Okay, I think Sheila's saying it's okay.
You got it. It was good.
Just making sure.
I mean, Susan also said this in the beginning, just 1:30 on Mondays for the next several weeks. We have a variety of topics, and if there's something you want to see us do, let us know. We put these together based off of the conversation that Lindsay's team had with sections, and we heard you wanted to know how to use Zoom, you want to know how to fundraise in crisis, you want to know how to generally navigate crises. So that's why we put these together. But be in touch with Lindsay or with myself, with any staff member, if you have other ideas of what you'd like to see. And Emily and Liz, we're really glad that you made the time today and that you're doing a second one for us. We're excited about it.
We love being here. I'm going to run through a few other questions. There's so many good questions coming in. So Carol asked, how do I access the speaker versus gallery view toggle? So that's in the upper right-hand corner. You should see something that says speaker view or gallery view. And so when you click one, it just transfers you either to that Brady Bunch looking option or the speaker only view. I should also say that this conversation, I think we have somewhere like 70 people who are here. This is a very well-attended webinar, and it's a pretty big meeting. Most of the conversations, I imagine, that the nature and the kind of culture of the meeting changes when you get, I would say, over 15 people. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't do meetings for over 15 people. It's actually remarkable to do a meeting of this size on Zoom, but the culture changes, right? So I would say if you are hosting a coffee meeting, with 10 people around a table, that's a much different kind of preparation level and formality than a 70-person meeting in a conference room with much more formal agenda. So the same thing is true. So it looks like there's still some questions about the speaker versus gallery view. So I'm actually going to do something I never do. Can you see? I'm going to share. I'm going to see if I can share. Okay. I wanted to see if I could share my Zoom view.
Yeah, I tried to do that too, and I don't think you can.
Yeah, I think the best we can do, and I want to just show this one more time, this slide. So if this is what your screen looks like, so here, these people that are turquoise, if those are all pictures of human beings, in the upper right-hand corner, you should see this gallery view or speaker view option. That might be a question that could be addressed offline. And there's never any apology necessary, but if folks don't see it, it's possible that it's just a different setup on your computer or your iPad.
And yeah, some folks are referencing iPads because that's a smaller screen, and you know, Zoom will adapt to what size screen you're on. That this may be also slightly different on iPad.
I'm going to just move to, there was one other great question. Somebody from the San Francisco section. Hello, San Francisco section. Thanks for joining us. You had a question about how Zoom generated some phone numbers and the link. So this gets back to what Liz was talking about earlier, which was Zoom is kind of a tool that's set up to do both video and phone. And so for some meetings, some people prefer to do all phone. Sometimes people say, oh, I'm going to be in the car, or, you know, in a different time, somebody may be not in their house and not able to tune in for a Zoom meeting, and they might phone as the next best thing. So Zoom basically will provide a phone number you can call into a meeting and the link where you can actually video in. And our recommendation for the most effective type of virtual meeting is to really set the expectation in advance. This is going to be, we're going to be using camera in this meeting, you know, be in a place where you can turn camera on. The other reason why sometimes those phone numbers are helpful is occasionally if people have an audio issue, you can use the phone number as like a backup audio source. And so I would just recommend you can share the phone numbers and the link. This is in response to the San Francisco section question. You can share both, but you may just say, please start with the link and be ready to turn your video on. I'm just trying to follow.
So I have a couple more things. Someone private chatted me and asked me about changing your name, which I just wanted to go through. So Emily mentioned that. And it's a nice thing. You can either do it when you set up your account, you'll put your name in and you'll, you know, select what you want to display on your Zoom calls. However, you can actually change it while you're on the call or when you're in any call if you're on someone else's meeting and you want to change your name. So if you go to where you see yourself and you roll over that, you'll see two things. You'll see mute and you'll see 3 dots. If you click on the 3 dots, you have a whole bunch of options: stop video, mute my audio, pin video, rename. You can add a profile picture here too. Someone asked about that. But if you hit rename, you can actually type in anything you'd like. So this might be helpful if you are, you know, the president of a chapter or a section, or you're, you know, you want to identify yourself by a title or something like that. Emily talked about adding pronouns. Whatever you'd like to appear on screen, you can change there. So I just wanted to answer that question, but also flag that you do have the option to rename yourself at any point, including on different call to call. So depending on who you're talking with, it might be helpful to identify yourself in a certain way. That option is there for you. And then someone else asked a question I thought was helpful as well. When you share your screen, where do you get that screen share from? So if you select share screen, again on that bottom menu, it will pop up with all of the windows that you currently have open on your computer, and it'll ask you which one you want to share. So you don't have to actually share like anything you're looking at. It should offer you the options of what you'd like to share with the meeting, so you can select that way.
There are so many other great questions. We're gonna keep rolling through them if that's okay with everyone. Oh, it looks like someone is screen sharing.
Yes, right. Eleanor, to answer your question, anyone can share, not just the host. So at any point during the meeting, if anyone clicks share, that will pop up for everyone in the meeting. So both a nice feature, but also something to be aware of.
And Liz, I think I've read a little bit more about, some of the security features. So if you do have more of if you have the non-basic package, I think there are some settings you can put in place where just the host can share, or there's like a few other levels of kind of control that you unlock. And so if somebody is concerned about that, that's something to just keep in mind. A few other things that I'm just noticing. When you think about an in-person meeting and you maybe distribute name tags, that's the equivalent of the name that you have on your Zoom account. So it's really helpful to have the name that you want to be called there. It would just encourage, my dad had something like Emily, Rebecca, and Sarah's dad or something. And it's not helpful because then no one would know what to call him. So I just wanted to flag that. The same thing you'd write in a name tag, you'd have as your name on Zoom. A few other things that I just was noticing. Pin video. So Barbara asked about pin video. You get this when you click on the 3 dots that appear by someone's video square. So here's an example of why I'm using pin video for Liz. Right now we have so many people on this call, and I wanted to make sure I could consistently see Liz's face through this presentation. So if she wanted to jump in, I could always see if she was sort of raising her hand or doing something that, rather than a verbal cue, if I got a visual cue from her that she wanted to ask a question or jump in with more content. So I pinned her video to the very top of this sort of Brady Bunch looking collage so I could always see her face. You might consider doing that if you're co-presenting a meeting with a few other people or something like that. The pin video feature, I think, is helpful on that front. Sandra, exactly, that's what I was talking about. I was talking to somebody earlier and he was looking this way, but I felt like I was looking at the side of his face. So I think that's important. If you have 2 screens, it's just important to know where the video is coming from so that you can sort of make eye contact with people. And Dale is asking how you set the pin video feature. So if you scroll over you just
don't say anything. Don't respond. Okay, it wasn't just to you.
If you scroll over anyone's video and you click on the 3 dots that you see in the upper right-hand corner, it's like a blue square, you can click on pin video, and that makes that person's video appear at the beginning within the first few people or stay exactly where it is. So you can always kind of lean on them for video cues. I would just say this is an unusually large meeting. I'm not sure if most meetings are going to have this many people. So some of these functions are things that you wouldn't necessarily need to use until you get into the 30 and 50 and 70 people coming to a meeting. Dale, did you have another question, or does that answer the question? I think it answers the question. Okay, good. All right, so we have about 10 more minutes. Are there other questions that have popped up? That was another great use for a Zoom feature. I have dealing with some allergies and had to cough, and so I just muted really quickly so that no one had to hear me coughing, and then I unmuted so I could keep talking again. Okay. Anne is asking setup of a meeting. So I'm gonna see if I can share. Liz, did you get any private questions, or does that?
No, that was the last one I saw.
Okay, so can folks see this? You can see I'm pregnant. This is a picture of a sonogram that we recently got. You can see my whole desktop. So this is what you see once you have set up your Zoom account. And these are the settings that we were talking about. So this is I've already gone to Zoom once and I've downloaded Zoom onto my computer. I'll explain how to do that in a second. But once you do that, this little gear in the upper right-hand corner, this is the place where a lot of the settings we've been talking about live. I'm gonna stop sharing for a second, and I'm gonna go to the Zoom website, and we can walk through the setup that way. Okay. Can folks see this? I'm sharing my screen with the Zoom. So this is zoom.us is where you go to set up your very first Zoom account. I just want to make sure everyone can see this. And then you go to sign up. It's free. So this is like the very, very first thing you do. And then you put in your email address. I unfortunately can't because I've already logged in once as myself, but you'd put in your email address and you'd click sign up. And then you'd be taken to a page where you confirm your account. And that's where you're given your customized Zoom URL and account number. So zoom.us, and then sign up, it's free, and then add your email address. And I would say for the folks that are having an issue with an iPad, that's true. The iPad is a different interface. So those might be the type of questions that we navigate offline, since a lot of folks are on laptops. I don't actually have an iPad with me, so I can't mirror the same experience. No, Sue, I wouldn't say it's bad to use your Google address to sign in. I would probably use your NCJW address if you're going to be using this for NCJW purposes, but I think your Gmail account is also fine. And Barbara, I would put your question about breakout rooms. I would say that that's probably best for our April 20th meeting. Karen, it looks like you may be running into a snag, so that's the type of thing maybe we would deal with offline. Yes. Bobby, the way to find out if you have a Zoom account is if you go to the Zoom icon on your computer and you look at that little gear icon, that's where you can find out if you have an account already. And the thing you're looking for is your particular URL associated with your account. So I think that, Elizabeth, great question. It's kind of like, I would say, email addresses. I have one Zoom account that I use that's registered to my personal email address, but I use it for work purposes. It's sort of strange because Zoom used to be an only work thing, and now it's becoming a home and personal life thing too. So I think that's probably the type of thing that you'd navigate, whether you felt comfortable using your personal account or not. I don't think it's necessary, though, to have multiple accounts. Liz, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I can't imagine. I would pay attention to the name. I would pay, as Emily said, you might want to have, like for your personal use, it just might say Liz, but for work purposes, you want your first and last, or your title, or that kind of thing. So I would just pay attention to the name. But in terms of the email address that you're using to sign in or having different accounts, I don't, off the top of my head, I don't see a reason to do that.
And then Anne was asking a question about after you set the date and time, exactly, then you copy that information and send it to participants. I'm gonna give, oh, Mindy, good question. The 40 minutes is per meeting, so it's not limited to per day or per week. It's only 40 minutes when you're meeting with more than one person. So meetings of 3 or more, that's when that 40 minutes thing pops in. I'm going to pass to Susan. I think we're getting a little short on time, so I'm going to pass it back to Susan. Just quickly, thank you again to NCJW for inviting us. We're very, very lucky to be here, and we're big fans of everything NCJW is doing. So Susan, back to you, and thanks again.
Yeah, so thank you for sharing such timely information. And what I love about this, for those of you who know me, I've been working out of my house and virtually for the last 12 years and doing virtual meetings. You can always learn something new. I never knew you could actually enhance your look but on Zoom, and I actually did it while we were recording, and I look so much younger. So anyway, thanks for that information. It was great. So you can always learn something new. So if you'd like to learn, or if you want to move your in-person meetings online and don't have an account, we're here to help you. So you can reach out to Leah Singman, L. Singman, S-I-N-G-M-A-N, and we'll send that out to you at ncjw.org. And we will be happy to assist you in setting up Zoom meetings. Also, next week is so exciting. Our next NCJW webinar is going to be fundraising in a global pandemic with Andrea Wasserman. So, you know, we all know how to do this, but what do you do now that it's virtual, right? So join Andrea Wasserman, who's a veteran fundraiser and consultant, for giving us the how-tos in this critical time. So we'll learn best practices and fundraising techniques, doing it virtually, for donors at all levels, how you can keep them engaged in your work. Again, next Monday at 1:30. And in case you still have even more time on your hands, we have a really exciting webinar tomorrow for the wider advocacy network and public on voter mobilization. I mean, you know, we're all used to voter mobilization. You knock on doors, you engage people face to face. You know, what are you going to do during a pandemic? So the current pandemic is going to change how we engage with others and perhaps even the way we vote. This is critical. So tomorrow we're going to have Senators Amy Klobuchar of my good old state of Minnesota and Ron Wyden of Oregon, along with our friends at Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, the Brennan Center, and NCJW field leaders, to learn how we can really work on getting out the vote and protect our elections during a pandemic. And I think we're all very, very interested in how we move from what we did a month and a half ago, really it was only a month ago even, to what we're doing now. So again, thank you so much to Emily and Liz for sharing your expertise. Thank you again, all of you, for joining us. We look forward to seeing you again tomorrow and next week. Stay well, stay safe, stay healthy. We're so glad you joined us today. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Peace all. Take care.
Bye.